That's right, I'm still here. I'm sorry it's been such a big delay in getting a video out to you, but I've been hugely busy in the workshop, as you can see by the general state of detritus everywhere. Sorry, excuse that clock striking over there. It is 10 o'clock, well, more or less. Anyway, I've been busy in the workshop catching up on restoration and doing restoration work, which is my day job, so that has to happen. But it has delayed me getting YouTube videos edited. Now I've got several things filmed, bigger project videos filmed, and I want to do a good job of those videos. That as well has delayed me because I've been focusing on making as good a video as I'm capable of doing, because I'm not a particularly good video editor, as you may have realised, but I enjoy putting out as good a video as I can. But there's a saying, perfection is the enemy of good. Or as I like to say sometimes, perfection is even the enemy of done. I'm guilty, really guilty, of chasing perfection and putting things off in view of, looking for the perfect opportunity to do something, or the perfect method, waiting for the perfect tool to do the best possible job. And I like to do the best possible job, but sometimes you need to take a step back and sort of say, well, that level of perfection isn't quite necessary, and it's preventing anything from happening. It's getting in the way of me doing anything at all. So that is case in point with my YouTube videos. I've been waiting for the time to do as good a job as possible. That time hasn't presented itself, and so nothing has happened. So I'm here now, I'm doing a video. It's not going to be a perfect video, but it'll be done and it'll be good, hopefully. So that's where we're at. Now, I've been watching a lot of Adam Savage's Tested YouTube channel, and I'm really inspired by his sort of work ethic and his drive in the workshop and his energy. And one of the things I noticed from him is that he just gets on and does it. He just cracks on. He does his one-day builds, which are great. I know he doesn't always achieve it in a day, but he does a one-day build, and they're always, I find, the most enjoyable videos of his to watch. Just raw footage of him in the workshop, basically. So I'll grab the camera and give you a little walk around and show you the state of affairs at the moment. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to complete a project, which is one of the projects that's been slowing me down, that's been delaying me. So I'm going to show you where I'm at with it. Today's the last day, hopefully, of that project. I'll finish it today. So I'm going to just set up the camera and bring you along for the sort of finishing off of the job. So I'll just show you where I'm at with it as we stand now. Okay, so you've seen this clock before. Certainly on Instagram I did a little close-up of the escapement. And I did show the making of the dial on a YouTube video, but this is a skeleton clock that was part finished. It was being made by somebody, and unfortunately he died, and so it was part finished. Now I've had this clock finished for some time, and I've been making a case for it, which I'll show you in a moment. But I've been the final bit of the project was, because it's been sitting around for so long, I just wanted to strip it down and clean it out, just make sure there's no dust and everything, because it's been sitting without a case in the workshop. So just wanted to give it a refresh so that the client gets it back in top condition. So that's what I'm doing now, just pegging everything out, and I'm also waxing the components with Renaissance wax, which is my absolute best friend. I love treating raw brass and steel components with that wax. So I'll actually show you waxing the fusee in a moment, because that's one of the few bits I haven't done. These bits are all done and ready to go back together. There's the dial. Now the case is here. This is the case. This isn't the best sort of reveal shot, but this is the case I've made for it. the decorator's tape is there because I'm still just doing the finish. So this has got 4 coats of Danish oil on it, which was left to dry overnight, and is giving a nice satin finish now. But I'm going to wax it with clear beeswax, and then I can take the tape off and clean the glasses, and then it will be finished. And you can see the base here. This is a beige sandstone, and the feet are actually made from brass 20mm brass ball bearings that I drilled and tapped, and then we've got a velvet inner. So I'll show you it as the clock comes together, but that's what I'm going to be doing now. I'll set up a couple of camera angles and get on with the finish. You can see how busy I've been by how everything is everywhere. As I think a few of you know, I like to work in a neat and tidy, methodical workshop, and at the moment, going from one job into the next, I've just got stuff everywhere. So I need to have a massive tidy up. So yeah, that's going to be a project in its own right. Anyway, on with the work. I just want to freshen up the fusee. So I'm just going to dismantle the great wheel, and then I can wax the parts. I'm just going to use a bit of isopropanol alcohol just to take the dirt that's built up from getting dusty, running in a sort of slightly dusty environment. Let's get rid of all of that. I mean, it's not too bad, but it's just showing a little bit of signs of, you know, I don't want it to go out like that. I'd rather take the moment now to make sure that it's as good as it can be for the client. And we'll wax it, which will help to prevent it from degrading and tarnishing. So to wax it, I tend to use a brush and just stipple a very small amount. It's not a large quantity around the part, and then, I mean, most of the time now we'll be getting it back off again because I like to buff it off. I try to avoid getting it too much into the teeth. I mean, it doesn't matter, but I don't sort of brush it into the teeth too much, because the clock's obviously going to just wear it back out again. So then I use a microcrystalline cloth, not a microcrystalline, what am I talking about? A microfiber cloth to buff it all back off. And that will give it a level of surface protection from tarnishing the fresh brass surface. I know I attempted not to get too much in the teeth, but I do like to give it a brush with just a dry brush, just to make sure that if anything did get into the teeth, that it's sort of brushed clean. There we go, so that's somewhere near. Okay, ready to go. I'm just waxing the Fusee. Now, one of the biggest problems with this clock actually is the timekeeping is not great. That's partly down to the design of the clock itself and the escapement, and it's got a huge escape wheel relative to the pendulum. And it's got a compound pendulum, and there are lots of factors fighting against it keeping good time. But I think it was designed really for sort of aesthetics, quirkiness, rather than timekeeping. A bit like the Congreve rolling ball clocks that I'm sure people are familiar with. I mean, don't expect too much of the timekeeping of one of those. But having said that, it could be better, and this part in my hand is one of the major culprits and areas where it could be improved. Now, this was one of the parts that was already made, so I didn't have the opportunity to shape this myself, and I was trying to maintain the integrity of the clock being made by somebody else. I was just finishing it, but if you look at the shape of the Fusee, we've got a very small diameter at this end really, and quite a large diameter at this end, but we've got a walloping great big modern mainspring. It simply doesn't need this exaggeration on the Fusee. So what's happening is between a full wind and a low wind, we've got a huge variation in power coming through the train, and that's having a massive effect on the timekeeping because it's affecting the amplitude. So if we were to remake this part, what I would do is to have a much larger diameter at full wind and a much slower, I'd probably keep this end similar, and have a much slower curve. So not as much of more of a straight line, to be honest. It's maybe a slight curve on it, but more of a straight line. Something more like that. It just doesn't need this level of exaggeration. So that would improve the timekeeping a lot. Because at the moment you have to average the timekeeping through the full wind, because it's way out up here and it's way out down here. So you're regulating it to average out through it. It's the same problem with a verge clock that has had a replacement mainspring. So the Fusee is often quite an exaggerated Fusee with a very small diameter at the top, and then it's got a modern mainspring in it which doesn't need that level of exaggeration, and the timekeeping is ruined. And again, with a verge, you've got the same scenario where the escapement is directly mounted onto the pendulum. There's no crutch. So it does seem to affect the amplitude more on clocks of that design. The plates are all lacquered. I did that at the time, so they are fine. They haven't been degraded or anything. So all I'm doing is just just dusting them off with a microfiber cloth, just to make sure that there's no loose dust or anything on the surface of them. Could argue that none of this is particularly necessary. The clock's only been finished a few months, but I just felt that now that the case was finished and it had been sitting in the workshop getting dusty, I thought it would be a nice thing to just make sure that it's as good as it can be. The screw heads, I also like to just put a little bit of wax on and then take it off again. But it helps to prevent even the blued surface of a screw head from picking up any rust. Rust is always an issue. You'd think it wasn't in a modern house, but the extreme temperature changes of having your central heating turned on and then turned off again, and you go away on holiday and the house temperature drops. All of these kinds of things, they contribute. So there we go. There's the plate ready to reassemble the clock, and that's all the parts clean now. So we'll put the clock back together again and finish off the case and get the clock finished. The single most important step prior to putting a clock back together, any clock, doesn't matter about the quality, doesn't matter what the clock is, be it a Tompion or a Smith's Enfield, you need to be sure that you've pegged it out well. That is a huge part of the longevity of any service on a clock. If you don't peg a clock out properly prior to putting it back together, then any dirt that's lingering in the pivot holes will mix with the oil, and it'll cause the oil to blacken and deteriorate far quicker than it needed to. So pegging out from both sides of the plate until the pegwood's clean. And then what I like to do, once I've got clean pegwood coming off, is to give it a final run through with just the pegwood wet with a little bit of isopropanol alcohol. And then I can be sure that that pivot hole is clean. The pegging also, the wood acts like a very, very soft burnisher. It's not much of an effect, but it is an effect nonetheless. So if there were any sort of very slight rough high spots or anything on the inside of the bushing, especially after it's been rebushed, then the pegwood can help to just level those out. That one's now, where's the camera? Not focusing. Anyway. Coming off clean anyway, even though you can't see it. Oh well. Another little thing before putting the clock back together is, once you've pegged it out, just make sure that you've cleaned the oil sink, because sometimes you can get dust from pegging out. You get sort of wood dust, shavings and little bits of dirt or whatever just around the pivot holes, and then you're counteracting the whole point of the cleanliness by dragging that dirt and dust into the oil when you oil it. So it's a good idea just to touch it with a little bit of clean Rodico just to make sure that everything is as clean as it can be. Getting some decent quality gloves is always a good start as well. It's a pet hate of mine. So as I said, I like to just finish by just using a piece of pegwood that's been wet with a little isopropanol alcohol, just to make sure that if there is anything, it's just lifted out. And there we go, that should be as clean as it needs to be. Ready for the next part of the reassembly. Right, everything is now ready for putting back together. It's all waxed up and pegged out and clean, and what I'm going to do is set myself up some fresh oils and we'll put it back together. But before I do that, I do want to just take the glass cover back over to the other part of the workshop and put some clear wax on the finish so that that has time to harden before I'm handling it again. So we'll do that next. I always like to give myself a fresh start when I'm putting together a clock that I want to be, well, I want all clocks to be clean, but I want to be particularly sure that I'm only putting fresh oils, fresh lubricants in. So this is the grease I'm doing at the moment. This is what I use, which is Horological DX. This is a paste. Don't ask me what's in it because I haven't got a clue. I'm not sure. No, it doesn't seem to say anything on it. I assume it's a sort of PTFE, but I'm not 100% certain. There we go. Nice fresh dollop of Horological DX grease. I was introduced to that when on a training course with Breitling. They use it on all the chronograph hammers and things. There's a high friction area grease, so it's something that I've stuck with. All my oils now are synthetic. I don't use any natural oils. they deteriorate just too quickly. And in this day and age, we have access to wonderful technology in the synthetic oil world, so I make the most of that. So the oils that I use are it's called HP 1300 and 9020, and those two oils are a nice pair of oils. You've got one which is a relatively high pressure oil, the HP 1300, and you've got one which is a relatively light oil but still will resist pressure to quite a degree. Just 9020, there we go, write that back in. These are the oils. So this one is the HP 1300 or 9104-5, and this is, I buy them in these 5 milliliter files because you don't want them hanging around too long. So you do want to use them up and go on to a fresh one. And I certainly can't afford to stock large quantities because this stuff is not cheap. So we'll leave the stock rotation for those who can afford it, i.e. the suppliers, and we'll go for just small quantities in stock. I think that's the way forward. So that's the HP 1300. HP standing for high pressure, I would assume. I use that on all the lower end of the train. And then this is the other oil that I use, 9020, which is you can see a lighter oil, both in colour and viscosity. You can get the HP 1300 not red, because I know not everybody appreciates the red colour. I actually quite like the red colour. I quite like being able to see if the oil is deteriorating, and if it's turned from red to black, then you know that you've got a problem. But if it still looks nice and red after a while, then you know that your oil is staying in good condition. It's much harder to see that transition with a lighter coloured oil like this, or a clear coloured oil. Also, it reminds me that I've actually oiled that pivot because I can see it. So I do actually quite like the red. Okay, so fresh oils. Let's start putting things back together again. I'm afraid this is going to be I'm doing the work, so this is just going to be me doing the work, and you sort of fly on the wall kind of view, because as I said earlier, it's a case of putting out a video without it slowing me down, I think is the best way of describing it. So That's very interesting. This is actually, all the screws have come loose on this. So as that's happened, I think what I'm going to do, because bear in mind this has been running for several months, I think what I'm going to do is to just put a small amount of blue Loctite on those, which is a thread lock, on those screws. Because one place that it would be an absolute disaster for the screw to come undone and the ratchet to fall off would be the ratchet inside the fusee. That would not be much fun for anybody. Particularly the person winding the clock at the time. Now granted, I know that those screws could never come all the way out. It's just not possible for them to unthread themselves that far. But even so, I don't want the winding ratchet coming loose. There we go. Okay, so there's the fusee. I'll put another spot of oil to top up the lubrication on the barrel, although I haven't dismantled the barrel again. This is setting the line, running the line onto the barrel, so that when it's wound for the first time under proper power, with proper setup on, the line will find its way onto the grooves of the fusee, because it's already, you can see it's laying itself down as it wants to come off the fusee. So when you wind it, it'll go back in line again. So you're not going to put a load of side strain on the line and potentially break it on the first wind. It's particularly important on a chain. Lines obviously can sort themselves out to an extent, but on a chain, if you put too much side load on it, then you're in big trouble. On earlier bracket clocks, they tend to have a hole between two teeth, and you can get a piece of silver steel, poke it into the hole, and actually get onto the tail of the click, and you can the pawl of the ratchet, and you can open the ratchet on the fusee, so you can wind it down without having to run the train through like this. Because that's the only sort of downside, is the fact that you're running the oil around a bit faster than it's intended to go. But as long as you keep a control on it and don't go mad, you see some people doing this and they'll just let go of the train and it goes woo! Not a good idea, because that's churning all the oil up and gunging it all up before you start. You're taking life out of the oil before you've even put the clock together. So I like to try and keep a control on it as best as possible. Takes a bit longer, but that's what we're here for. You do get a chance doing this just to see that the train is running free as well, and that you've still got end shakes everywhere you're expecting to have end shakes, which is obviously a massively important part of clockmaking. If you put together a clock like this and it doesn't have end shake or end float, then it just won't work. Or if it does, it'll be very unreliable, and timekeeping is likely to be erratic as it tries to drag its way through the train. Now you can see how the line is laid down onto the barrel as it's come off the fusee. It's important to just keep a small amount of wind on at all times. Don't let the wind come off completely, because you'll find all of a sudden the line will spring everywhere, and then it'll undo all the work that you've just done getting this far. So then as we come to the end, there you go. So now is the time to set it up. So I can feel the point at which the line is going slack, which is about there. And I'm going to give it, from the key here, I'm going to give it quarter of a turn setup, which keeps the line taut. Now the setup it can affect, particularly with a fusee that is like this, that's so extreme compared to the spring. The setup can affect the timekeeping, because obviously if you put a lot of setup on at the bottom of the wind, then you're making it even more exaggerated, even stronger at the bottom, and it will mean that perhaps you get more power at the top. So there's a balancing act to be found, but I find quarter of a turn is a good starting point for any clock, really. As I said earlier, there are many elements of the design of this clock that leave a little bit to be desired, unfortunately. That's not saying anything against the maker. He's just following the instructions. But the design, this is a Smith, W.R. Smith. It's not designed with horology and timekeeping in mind, really. But one thing that I find a little bit difficult to come to terms with is the fact that you have to have the motion work on before you can before you can put the escapement together, which seems a little bit weird, but there we go. It is what it is. Let's just make sure none of that dust, get rid of all the little specks of dust. The hand tension washer. And the minute or cannon wheel. This is another slightly quirky feature of this particular clock, is because it's got lantern pinions on the motion work, you have to put it together, if that makes sense, because you can't get the hour wheel on otherwise. So the reverse minute wheel and the hour wheel have to go on in tandem. Something along those lines. And the motion work is going to be tight until the hands are on, because the tension washer is pushing everything forwards. It's the moment that this particular clock really looks like it starts coming together, is when you put this giant escape wheel on. And you'll see what I mean about how the hour wheel won't come past the escape wheel. So in order to take the motion work off, you have to take the escape wheel off, which is a bit crazy, but there we go. So another big milestone moment with this one is installing the pallets. Now obviously none of that is counterbalanced until pendulum is fitted. So pendulum's on. Just loosely hold that on there, because I need to do the final adjustments when I've got the dial and hands on. Again, a slight idiosyncrasy of this clock is that the dial and hands have to be fitted to pull the motion work back before you can sort of finalize where the escape wheel sits. It's starting to look something like it's supposed to now. Okay, so you can probably see here what I'm talking about. The clearances between the front of the motion were at the back of the escape wheel and the front of the front escape wheel and the back of the dial are all pretty tight, and it only becomes apparent exactly where the escape wheel needs to sit once you've got the dial and hands on, because I haven't pushed the motion work back yet with the hand collet. And then you can set the pallets to be in the right orientation fore and aft with the escape wheel. Right, now that the hands are on, that's not the final pin, by the way. I will shorten the pin and dome it off. But now that the hands are on, we can see the motion work pushed back to where it wants to be. And actually that clearance is pretty much right, I think. So I'll just tighten up the escape wheel and then I can set the orientation of the pallets. Now I know that the pendulum is balanced because I've already had this clock working and I haven't touched the pendulum. Let me get a better camera angle. So I haven't actually affected the balance of the pendulum at all, but what I have done is taken the front part of the escapement off and back on again. So the front part of the escapement has to be balanced in relationship to the pendulum. Pendulum has to be balanced on its own first. And as I say, that's that's done. So at the moment it's sitting very slightly over to one side. So if I just do that, that's a bit too far. Right, I think that's about it. So now the escapement is balanced to the pendulum, so the whole thing still sits down the middle, if you like, when it's at rest. So now that that's done, that position is fixed, and we've got the pallets in the right position fore and aft, I can pinch down those screws. There we go. So putting a small amount of wind on myself, just pushing on the center wheel, I can see that it wants to run. So I don't think too much to it. So let's put a little bit of wind on and see what happens. Oh yeah, another one to go on the list of things I don't like about the design of this clock. In order to wind it, you have to stop it. The winding square is right behind the pendulum. So the only way of winding it is to push the pendulum over to one side. There we go, it seems happy enough again. I will just double check the adjustment of the escapement because it's been apart and back together again. Make sure nothing has moved within the escapement. But it seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing, as it was before. So now that we've established it's working and it's all back together again, next stage is to fit it to its base as a sort of final act for the first ever time. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this bit now. I was going to do it off camera, but you might as well see it. So this is the process for, for any kind of movement of this clock really. You want to wire the escapement because it's perfectly possible for the escapement on this type of design of Grasshopper to unlock, and then you can have what's known as affectionately in the trade as a run through, which is not very pleasant. Then pull the pendulum over to one side and wire the pendulum up as well. That way everything is safe. So even with power on, everything is safe. It can't run through or because even unlocking the escapement, nothing is allowing the no power is allowed through the train. So here's the new base for it. So we'll fit this the clock to the base for the first time. exciting moment now. We have the clock on its base. Now it's time to fit the whole thing to the sandstone base. This is beige sandstone. I really like the look of it. So now I've just got to try and get the bolts on without a whole lot ending up on the floor or any other disaster of that type. There's not really any need to crank down on these particularly hard, but I'll just nip them. That's the one with the glue in it, and then so now we are getting dangerously close to being finished. Well, if I do say so myself, then that's looking rather good. I'm very pleased with the look of the base. That's exactly what I was going for. Those are the feet made from 20mm brass ball bearings. And the beige sandstone, velvet inner base, and then the lacquered brass of the clock. I think it all goes quite well. And the final element will be the oak stringing of the glass case. So I'll go and look if the wax has dried enough to buff it up now. I'm just buffing off the third coat of wax now. First coat was put on with 4/0 wire wool, and then two subsequent coats with the microfiber cloth. Left to harden in between each coat, and it's come up really nice. Really nice sort of luster come up on this. So there we go. So the bit that I've been waiting for is to take the tape off. So let's have a go. Just a little bit there that needs. Okay. So it's just a case of cleaning up the glasses and the case is done. There we go, the completed clock. I've just done a little bit of fiddling off camera, if I'm honest. The timekeeping is still coming in, shall we say, and now that it's all cased up, I found that it was actually touching the velvet, because the velvet has a dimension underneath the feet of the clock here. So I've made these little spaces and just jacked the clock up slightly to give it some more clearance, just to stop the pendulum from touching the velvet. There we go, it's all up and running. Case completed. Clock cleaned and ready for a test before going back or going to the client. The client has never actually seen it in finished condition, so there we go. There we go, all done, all together. The beige sandstone base, feet, the oak case, velvet inner. I'm really pleased with the results. The case was completely from scratch to house the clock. The clock was made, as I think I said earlier, the sort of 80% of the clock was finished, so he hadn't been able to finish it, so I'm finishing it off for him. So the majority of the clock was made, so it does reflect his workmanship more than mine, and his workmanship is excellent, I have to say. Really, really sharp, crisp, very well made, and it just needed the finishing touch to finish it off, and the case making. So I'm pleased with that project. So it's all finally finished. It's been sort of ongoing for many months now, doing a bit at a time, and now it's complete. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you don't mind the slightly rough and ready video, but I thought you'd find this interesting. See you on the next video. Bye.